Welcome back, everyone. Sheepdog Smokey here, and we have Ralph Benko asking a very good question. But before we dive in, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you're the first to know of all new content as it posts. For now, though, let's dive into Mr. Benko's question. Are today's progressives actually totalitarians? I would answer yes, very simply. I would do that because I have watched in the last 3 years specifically as today's progressives have assaulted people for inviting speakers to private events. I've watched as they have stolen signs. I've watched as they have screamed and hurled insults at people. I've watched as members of our own government have egged them on. And it all comes down to the same thing. And of course, we do have the New American Oxford Dictionary defines totalitarianism, or totalitarian as, of or relating to a system of government that is centralized and dictatorial and requires complete subservience to the state, a totalitarian regime, or a person advocating such a system of government. Pardon me. Some good news, I did not buy cigarettes on the way home. I am really working to do this time. But you see, in the very, very late 50s and the 60s and 70s, progressives were the party of peace, love, tolerance. They were the party of, we don't want big government. We don't like Big Brother being involved in everything. Unfortunately, those people, after they grew up and had kids, decided that getting the government out of their business also included changing education, specifically how history is taught and what is taught. You see, when I went to high school in the 1990s, I learned the basic facts of the American Revolution, that in the 1770s there was the Stamp Act. And yes, it was a tax on stamps. But in order to buy anything that was imported into the country, which was virtually everything you needed to buy, you must buy a stamp. Therefore, it was a tax on everything and anything you needed to buy. The American colonists decided they didn't like this. We threw a bunch of tea in the harbor. Lexington and Concord happened, where we were ordered to disarm and said no. Several years later, we had won the war. A decade or so later after that, almost 2 decades in fact, we had our Constitution and the ratification was complete, and we began this experiment called the United States. And it worked for a while. We have our dark spots. Slavery chief among them. My own ancestors fought for the Union in the Civil War to end that blight on our country. And the Union won. We had roughly 100 years of drama and hardship after that. First with the Southerners now stripped of their slaves, trying to keep the slaves down until 1873, I believe. I'd have to look up the date. But the National Rifle Association decided these are American citizens, we're going to protect their rights. Ultimately, antebellum time drew to a close, the South began to prosper, and then we had the Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 60s. We're nowhere near perfect, but we are much better off than we were even 50 years ago. But now, we have people who have decided, if I don't personally approve of everything you want to do, you are not allowed to do it. We have seen people assaulted. We had the people, now granted this is in Canada, but they are progressive up there too. We had the idiot who was being videotaped harassing and haranguing an older woman for being pro-life, until he decides to kick her. We have the idiot in the UK who decided to scream insults in an older gentleman's face who was helping someone else up until he was hit with a milkshake, and then she laughs. She's now been fired from her job with the NHS, by the way. And we have our wonderful progressives here in the States, where on UC Berkeley, when a private organization hosting a private meeting invites a speaker to their private meeting, of which these progressives would not be attending, they riot, start destroying the college campus that they are on, and even start assaulting people for the crime of not being liberal. I don't know how many of you have, but you really need to read 1984. After that, read Brave New World, Animal Farm, Fahrenheit 451. There are any number of books that tell of a possible future where mankind is subjugated under brutal tyrannical rule. Right now, of course, progressive defines its mission as winning back for the people complete power over government, national, state, and municipal, which has been lost to them. No, it hasn't. We're close to that at the national level, but we have not lost the power. We still elect our leaders at the municipal, state, and federal level. Right now, at least vast majority of the time at the federal level, that leads to nothing more than a junkyard scrum for power in the halls of Congress. I don't know of hardly anything at all they've done in the last year or two, other than for Democrats to scream for impeachment, Republicans to say no, and now that Mueller has said there was no collusion and there is no evidence of obstruction, it's the same thing. But beyond that, when you look at just a few examples, we have former Attorney General Eric Holder. When they go low, we kick them. You have former Secretary of State and failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. We will be civil after we win. And the most egregious example, Representative Maxine Waters and her quote of the century: get in their faces, push back, let them know they're not welcome anywhere. All of these, of course, aimed at conservatives and supporters of the president. And as soon as 2016's election was over, the violence began. And, of course, Democrats ignore it and passively egg it on. Because as long as there is division, strife, violence, they can blame it on everyone that's not them. They say that because Donald Trump has not resigned, people are beating up his supporters. No. They're beating up his supporters because they think they have the right to rule. And this is exactly what Orwell saw in 1984, a different version of it, mostly drug-fueled control in Brave New World, the failure of socialism in Animal Farm, and 1984 Light in Fahrenheit 451. Famously, Fahrenheit 451 is, yeah, you're still the US of A, but we're going to monitor everything you do. And we're going to tell you what you are and are not allowed to own or read or listen to or watch. There will be no private media organizations. It will all be run by the government. We're not far off. We're never far off from one of those societies. Freedom is never more than one generation from extinction. And I would argue that we are possibly not a single generation, but two from the death of freedom. You see, we have a lot of very intelligent, very well spoken, and very conservative and very patriotic young people. But young people are not having children the way their grandparents did. I'll admit, I don't have kids. But that's a story for a different day. My brother has one child. My sister has two. So among my siblings, we have replaced each other collectively. But then you add in my brother's ex-wife and my sister's husband. So we are now less than replacement. And this is the fuel for this fire. Of course, it allows Democrats to demand we import more workers because we don't have them. Well, we do, and we would allow immigration as long as it is legal. They then point to crime and drugs and everything else as a reason to seize more power. And it will only get worse. We can only look at the final paragraph of this article, and I will, of course, be linking this at the bottom, but we can use here Progressive is so much nicer a word than totalitarian. Yet progressives are in danger of turning their brand into a frighteningly Orwellian euphemism for totalitarianism. To the Ministry of Truth's war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, we may now be required to add, totalitarianism is progress. I've talked long enough. Let me know what you think. As always, remain civil. We do not learn from argument, we learn from debate. I've already had several comments where I just ignore them because they ignore that simple rule of conversation. As always, though, remember to like and share the video so that we can widen the conversation. And again, please remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you are the first to know of all new content as it posts. Until next time, everyone have a wonderful day.